Picture this. Île Sainte-Marie, off the eastern coast of Madagascar. April, 1698. The wet season is ending, and the tropical sun is burning off the last of the morning haze from a shallow coral-fringed bay. On the beach stands a Scotsman, 53 years old, tall, tired, sun-blackened, still wearing what used to be a captain's coat. His name is William Kidd. In his pocket, folded and salt-stained, he carries 3 commissions signed under the Great Seal of King William III of England. He is, on paper, the King's own privateer. In front of him, tied to the shore in less than a fathom of water, is his ship, or what remains of her, the Adventure Galley, 287 tons, 34 guns, 46 sweeps, 3 masts, launched at Deptford Yard on the Thames only 28 months earlier for the astronomical sum of £8,000, is finished. Her hull is riddled with shipworm. Her pumps have been running around the clock for weeks. Her rigging is rotten. Her stores are gone. 97 of her crew have deserted overnight to join another pirate, Robert Culliford, anchored just across the bay in a ship called the Mocha frigate. You are standing next to Kidd. The men left to him, 13 loyalists, carry the last of the powder, the last of the biscuit, the last of the guns off her decks. They stack it on the beach. Kidd gives an order. A torch is put to the tar-soaked timbers. The Adventure Galley, the ship that was supposed to make him rich, the ship the king's own investors built, the ship that was supposed to hunt down every pirate in the Indian Ocean, burns to the waterline in front of her captain. She sinks in the shallow harbour of Sainte-Marie. She has never been definitively found again. And what Captain Kidd does not yet know, standing there watching her burn, is that in London he has already been declared a pirate. His backers are already pretending they never knew him. His trial has already been scheduled in the minds of powerful men. And at the end of a rope, at the mouth of the Thames, an iron gibbet cage is already, in some sense, waiting for him. This is not a story about a lost ship. This is the story of how a king's commission became a king's rope, of how the Adventure Galley and the man who commanded her were consumed by the same worm, from the inside out, of a wreck that has never been found, and a captain who, through folklore, betrayal, and 3 centuries of embellishment, has never quite come home either. This is Adventure Galley, the cursed ship of Captain Kidd that vanished. To understand what happened in that Madagascar bay, you have to understand what was happening 5,000 miles away, in London, in the last decade of the 17th century. The 9 years. War between England and France was grinding to a close. The Treaty of Ryswick would be signed in September 1697. But something else was happening in parallel, something the young English state could not ignore. Piracy in the Indian Ocean had exploded. In 1695, an English pirate named Henry Every had committed the greatest single act of piracy of the age. Off the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, he captured the Ganges Sawai, a treasure ship belonging to the Grand Mughal of India, Aurangzeb. The pirate crew looted the ship, brutalized the passengers, and vanished into legend. But the Mughal emperor's fury was very real. He threatened to shut down all English trade in India. The English East India Company, one of the most powerful commercial corporations on earth, was suddenly in existential danger over the crimes of one man. In London, a small circle of Whig grandees decided that something had to be done, officially, discreetly, profitably. The syndicate that came together in the autumn of 1695 was extraordinary. Richard Coote, the Earl of Bellamont, newly appointed Governor of New York, Massachusetts Bay, and New Hampshire, John Somers, Lord Chancellor of England, the Duke of Shrewsbury, the Earl of Romney, the Earl of Oxford, Sir Edmund Harrison, and behind them, quietly, King William III himself, who was not technically an investor, but was promised 10% of the profits. What they wanted was a captain who could do 2 things: hunt pirates in the Indian Ocean and, under the ongoing letters of marque against France, seize French shipping. What they needed was a man who understood both the Atlantic and the Eastern Seas, a man respectable enough to be trusted with a royal commission, but expendable enough to be quietly disowned if anything went wrong. Enter William Kidd. William Kidd was born around 1645, most likely in Greenock, on the Firth of Clyde in Scotland, though some accounts place his birth in Dundee. His father was, by tradition, a Calvinist minister. His youth is almost entirely undocumented. What is documented is that by 1689, he was captain of a privateer called the Blessed William, sailing against the French in the Caribbean during the 9 Years' War. He had a reputation for competence and for loyalty to the crown. By 1691, he had settled in New York. He married Sarah Bradley Cox Ort, a twice-widowed heiress who was one of the wealthiest women in the colony. He owned a house on Queen Street, fronting the East River. He kept a pew at Trinity Church. He was, in every visible respect, a respectable colonial merchant. In 1695, he sailed to London on business, and there, through his fellow Scot Robert Livingston, a well-connected New York landowner, he was introduced to the Earl of Bellamont. The deal was signed on the 10th of October, 1695. Kidd and Livingston would pay 1/5 of the expenses. Bellamont and his fellow lords would pay the other 4/5. Kidd would command the expedition. His royal commission was issued under the Great Seal on the 26th of January, 1696. He was authorized to hunt pirates, including, if possible, Henry Every himself, and to seize French shipping. Anything he took was to be split with the syndicate. It was a no purchase, no pay contract, no captures, no wages. The ship built for him was the Adventure Galley. She was launched on the 4th of December, 1695, at Captain William Castle's dockyard at Deptford, on the Thames. Castle's yard was one of the largest private shipyards in England and a regular supplier to the East India Company. On paper, the Adventure Galley was a masterpiece of purpose-built engineering. 287 tons burthen, 124 feet along the keel, 28 feet in the beam, 34 light cannon, 3 masts, fully ship-rigged with square sails, and her defining feature, 46 sweeps or oars, distributed along her sides, which allowed her to be rowed in calm conditions at roughly 3 knots when other sailing ships lay dead in the water. This was the trick. Pirate sloops in the Indian Ocean regularly waited out chasers in calm weather, knowing a king's frigate could not follow. The Adventure Galley could. She could reach 14 knots under full sail and still crawl forward under oar when the wind died. She was a hunter designed for a specific prey. There was one problem. She was not built to last. Later evidence. The speed with which her rigging failed, the speed with which her hull rotted, strongly suggests Castle's yard cut corners on materials to pocket the difference. Common practice at the time. Catastrophic in the tropics. She cost £8,000. In today's money, roughly $1 million. Black Flag Codex plug number from 1. Before we sail with her, one quick note. If you love this kind of history, the ships, the specs, the actual documents behind the legends, I've put together a free companion piece called The Black Flag Codex. It's a curated collection of primary source excerpts, ship diagrams, and the strange, small facts that don't fit inside a video. Link and QR code are in the description. Now, back to Deptford Yard, and the launch of a ship that was already, in ways nobody could yet see, doomed. The Adventure Galley left Deptford on the 6th of April, 1696. She was barely a day into her voyage when the first strange thing happened. Sailing down the Thames past Greenwich, she failed to salute a Royal Navy yacht as custom and admiralty regulation required. The yacht fired a warning shot to remind her of her manners. Kidd's crew, aloft in the yardarms, responded, according to the report filed by the yacht's captain, by turning around, dropping their trousers, and slapping their backsides at the king's ship. It is a small moment, but it is the first bad omen. And the complaint from that yacht captain would find its way, eventually, to the Admiralty. Kidd had made an enemy before he had even cleared the estuary. Worse followed. Passing near Cape of Good Hope in December of 1696, Kidd encountered a Royal Navy squadron under Commodore Thomas Warren. He requested new sails to replace those already damaged in the Atlantic Passage. Warren refused, and, in a moment of what looks like professional contempt, threatened instead to press gang 30 of Kidd's crew. Kidd waited until dark, and then, under oars, in dead calm, he slipped away from a Royal Navy squadron. It was the perfect demonstration of what the Adventure Galley was built for. It was also, in the eyes of the Royal Navy, the act of a man with something to hide. She reached Tulia on the southwest coast of Madagascar on the 27th of January, 1697. The voyage from Deptford had taken 9 months. Her sails were already worn out. Her rigging was already failing. She had barely lasted 8 months in blue water. That is not a well-built ship. Then came the sickness, malaria, yellow fever, something tropical and merciless. Between 1/3 and a half of Kidd's crew died at Johanna in the Comoros. He replaced them with men he could recruit locally, that is, with men no reputable captain would take, hardened sailors. Some of them almost certainly former pirates themselves. This is the crew Kidd is now stuck with, and they are on a no purchase, no pay contract. They have been on this cruise for over a year. They have not been paid a shilling. There are no pirates in sight to hunt, and the East India Company convoys are too well armed to touch. By the summer of 1697, the Adventure Galley was patrolling the Red Sea and the Malabar coast. In August, Kidd attempted to attack a Mughal convoy at Bab el Mandeb. He was chased off by an armed East India Company escort, the same company he had been commissioned to protect. That single act, attacking a Mughal convoy, was enough. Word raced back to London. The company began writing letters. The king's privateer, they said, had turned pirate. Then came the killing. It happened on the 30th of October, 1697. Kidd was on the quarterdeck. His gunner, a man named William Moore, was on the main deck, grinding down a chisel on a whetstone. Moore had been agitating for weeks. He wanted Kidd to attack a Dutch merchant ship they had sighted. Kidd refused. Attacking a Dutch ship was not privateering, it was piracy, and worse, King William III was Dutch by birth. It would be a personal insult to their patron. There are several accounts of the exchange, but the essentials agree. Kidd called Moore a lousy dog. Moore, sharpening the chisel, replied, "If I am a lousy dog, it is you who have made me so." Kidd, in a rage, seized an iron-bound wooden bucket from beside him and struck Moore on the head. The gunner collapsed. He died the next day. Under English maritime law, this was manslaughter at best, murder at worst. Kidd would later claim self-defense against a mutinous crew member. The 2 witnesses at his trial would testify otherwise, and in a courtroom at the Old Bailey, 3.5 years later, that iron-bound bucket would be the single most damaging piece of evidence against him. 3 months later, on the 30th of January 1698, off the Malabar coast near Cochin, the Adventure Galley captured her greatest prize. She was called, in most accounts, the Quedar Merchant, though her name in the original ship's papers was Kara Merchant, 400 tons, Armenian-owned, carrying a cargo of silks, muslin, sugar, opium, saltpeter, iron and gold and silver worth an estimated £70,000. She was captained by an Englishman named John Wright, and critically, this is the point on which everything turned, she was flying a French pass. A safe conduct issued by the French authorities of the port she had cleared from. Under Kidd's commission, a French pass made her a legitimate prize. Kidd took her. He renamed her the Adventure Prize, but her cargo belonged, in part, to a favourite of the Mughal court. When word reached Aurangzeb, his fury was worse than after every. He threatened again to shut down English trade in India. The East India Company demanded blood. And in London, the syndicate that had backed Kidd, Bellamont, Somers, Shrewsbury, realised, with mounting horror, that they had funded a diplomatic catastrophe. Kidd arrived back at Ile Sainte-Marie on Madagascar's east coast around the 1st of April, 1698, sailing the Adventure Prize with the crippled Adventure Galley limping behind. Waiting for him in the harbour was Robert Culliford, one of the very pirates he had been sent to hunt, aboard the Mocha frigate. Kidd's crew, starved, unpaid, dissatisfied with their share, made their choice. 97 of them deserted overnight. They joined Culliford. Kidd was left with 13 loyal men, and with a ship that could no longer be saved. The Adventure Galley by this point was, in the words of one witness, so leaky that we were forced to keep 2 pumps continually going. Teredo Navalis, the shipworm, had honeycombed her hull in the warm Indian Ocean waters. Careening at Comoros had bought her time. It had not saved her. In April of 1698, Kidd gave the order. The Adventure Galley was stripped of her cannon, her powder, her sails, her rigging, her nails, her fittings, everything of value. And then she was set alight in the shallow harbour of Sainte-Marie. She burned to the waterline and sank into the sand and coral. The ship the king's own men had built to hunt pirates was buried, without a marker, in a pirate harbour on the far side of the world. Kidd transferred to the Adventure Prize and sailed for the Caribbean. In April of 1699, at Anguilla, he learned for the first time that he had been publicly declared a pirate. Every English port was closed to him. He left the Adventure Prize anchored off Mona Island, near Hispaniola, in the care of a small guard crew under a merchant named Henry Bolton. He bought a smaller sloop called the San Antonio, and he sailed north. The guard crew, hearing later that Kidd had been arrested and that they themselves might be hanged as his accomplices, stripped what remained of value from the Adventure Prize and set her on fire. She burned down through her waterline and sank in shallow water off what is today Catalina Island. This is why, in December of 2007, Charles Beaker's team from Indiana University would find her cannons scattered on the seabed exactly where Kidd had said he left her, but no ship above them. She had never sailed again. Along the way, he did something almost no other pirate in history has ever been documented doing. Off Long Island, he buried part of his treasure on Gardiner's Island. He left a receipt with the island's owner, John Gardner. He believed it would give him leverage. He was wrong. On the 6th of July, 1699, he surrendered in Boston to his own patron, the Earl of Bellamont, on a promise of clemency. Bellamont, under pressure from London and quietly cutting his losses, had him arrested and thrown in jail. The treasure was recovered from Gardiner's Island later that summer, approximately £14,000 in gold, silver, and merchandise. It was the only confirmed pirate treasure ever recovered by the authorities from the Golden Age of Piracy. Kidd spent over a year in a Boston jail, then a year in Newgate Prison in London, much of it in solitary confinement. His health collapsed. On the 8th of May, 1701, he was tried at the Old Bailey, first on the charge of the murder of William Moore, then on 5 counts of piracy. The French passes that would have proven the Quedar merchant a legal prize under his commission, the 2 documents that were the foundation of his defence, were never entered into evidence. They had, in the language of the time, conveniently disappeared. He was convicted on all counts, sentenced to hang. On the 23rd of May, 1701, William Kidd was taken by procession, behind the Admiralty Deputy Marshal, who carried the silver Admiralty oar as symbol of authority, to execution dock at Wapping, on the north bank of the Thames. He was, by contemporary accounts, extremely drunk. He had been given rum to steady him. Whether it did or not is a matter of interpretation. The rope broke on the first drop. He fell to the mud. He was hauled up. A second rope was fetched. This time it held. His body was then tied to a stake at the low water mark. And by the Admiralty custom for pirates, 3 tides were allowed to wash over it, so that all who used the river might see. Only then was he cut down. His corpse was tarred, wrapped in iron chains, and hung in a gibbet cage at Tilbury Point, at the mouth of the Thames. The last thing every sailor entering the port of London would see, and the first thing every sailor leaving it would see. He remained there for 3 years. Black Flag Codex Plug Number 2. The trial transcripts, the surviving letters between the syndicate lords, the Admiralty documents about the gibbet at Tilbury, a lot of the primary sources on Kidd survived, and they are extraordinary reading. I've pulled together the most striking excerpts in the Black Flag Codex. Link is in the description if you want to go deeper on any of this. Now, the second life of Captain Kidd, the one that started the moment he stopped breathing. The Adventure Galley and her captain both died in 1701, one in April at Sainte Marie, one in May at Wapping. Everything from that point forward is legend, embellishment, or historical detective work. Let us separate the three. The curse. From the moment of Kidd's execution, contemporary balladeers and later Victorian writers insisted the Adventure Galley had been cursed from the beginning. The evidence they cited, the failed salute, the press gang losses, the tropical sickness, the failed hunts, the killing of Moore, the shipworm, the mutiny, the betrayal by Bellamont, the trial, the gibbet. It made for a compelling story, but the skeptical reading is simpler and, honestly, harder. Every European hull in the Indian Ocean in the 1690s was destroyed by Teredo worm. The company lost ships at the same rate. Mutinies on failed privateering cruises were routine. Henry Every himself had turned pirate through exactly such a mutiny against his own captain at La Coruña in 1694. The killing of a crewman during an argument was common enough that Admiralty courts had a standing procedure for it. And political scapegoating, the sacrifice of one small man for the crimes of larger men, was practically the founding principle of the 17th century English state. In short, what looks like a curse is what any ordinary bad luck privateering cruise looked like, compressed by a very bad political moment. There was no supernatural malice at work, only bureaucracy, biology, and betrayal. The treasure. Almost everything you think you know about pirate buried treasure comes from Kidd. The idea of a marked map, a coded cipher, a lonely island, a chest of gold. These are Kidd tropes, not general pirate practice. Pirates almost never buried treasure. They spent it. Kidd buried some on Gardiner's Island as legal leverage, not as a hoard. The story that he had buried $100,000 more comes from a letter he wrote from Newgate to the Earl of Bellamont's wife, a desperate letter, offering a fortune for a rescue that would never come. The 100,000 may not have existed at all, but the letter, once made public, set every gentleman treasure hunter in the North Atlantic in motion. Oak Island, in Nova Scotia, Deer Island, in Maine, Grand Manan, Money Cove, and every one of those 200-year treasure hunts, in a sense, is Kidd's fault. What was actually recovered by the authorities from his actual caches is a matter of documented record. About £14,000 from Gardiner's Island. That is the entirety of the confirmed Kidd treasure. The French passes. For 2 centuries, Kidd's defenders, beginning with the ballad writers within months of his death, argued that the 2 French passes proving the Quedagh merchant a legal prize had been deliberately suppressed at his trial to protect his backers. It was a compelling theory, and in 1911, in a London government building, a set of misfiled 17th century Admiralty papers turned up. Among them, folded into the wrong dossier, were the 2 French passes. They had existed. They had been in London the whole time. Kidd's defence had been the truth. 3 centuries too late. The paperwork confirmed it. The wreck. This is where the story turns strange again. In the late 1990s, and again in 2015, the underwater explorer Barry Clifford, the man who found the Wider off Cape Cod, announced he had located the Adventure Galley off Ile Sainte-Marie. In May of 2015, he presented what he called a 50-kilogram silver ingot to the president of Madagascar in a televised ceremony, and identified it as part of Kidd's treasure. Within weeks, UNESCO sent a team of underwater archaeologists to investigate. Their report, released in July 2015, was blunt. The bar was 95% lead. It was not silver and not treasure. The wreck Clifford had identified was, in the investigators' judgment, not the Adventure Galley at all, but a broken piece of the old port infrastructure of Sainte Marie. Clifford disputed the report vehemently. He continues to dispute it. But as of today, the wreck of the Adventure Galley has never been definitively identified. What has been found, and this is the extraordinary counterpoint, is the Adventure Prize. 10 cannon on the seabed off Catalina Island in the Dominican Republic. The keel still recognizable beneath them. The wreck is now a protected archaeological site and a living underwater museum, and every one of those recovered cannon confirms, in iron and coral, the two things Kidd swore at the Old Bailey and no one there believed him: that he left the ship where he said he did, and that she was already, on the day he left her, a legitimate prize. Kidd, in this one small posthumous way, has been proven right. Kidd entered folklore before his body left the gibbet. Within months of his execution, broadside ballads were being sold in London taverns. The most famous of them, Captain Kidd's Farewell to the Seas, or the famous Pirate's Lament, got his first name wrong. It rendered him as Robert Kidd, and that error has never been corrected in 3 centuries of folk transmission. By the 18th century, Kidd was standard tavern lore. By the 19th, he was romantic literature. Washington Irving wrote him into The Devil and Tom Walker in 1824. Edgar Allan Poe seeded the entire idea of a coded pirate map with the Gold Bug in 1843, a story whose treasure hunters are chasing, explicitly, Captain Kidd's cipher. Robert Louis Stevenson used the Kidd legend as the emotional foundation of Treasure Island in 1883. The Money Pit on Oak Island, subject of documentaries, novels, one of the longest-running reality television programs in history, is powered, still, by the myth of Kidd's hidden hoard. On screen, Kidd has been played by Charles Laughton in the 1945 Captain Kidd, and by Nicolas Cage as a bumbling vocal kid in a Disney short. But his real legacy in modern pop culture is diffuse. Every gibbet scene in Pirates of the Caribbean, every gentleman betrayed by the king's men, trope in maritime fiction, every buried treasure map with a red X and a skull, every pirate captain who was, or claimed to be, more sinned against than sinning. Kidd is the template, the unlucky pirate, the scapegoat, the gentleman on the wrong end of the rope. He is also, in a strange way, the most cinematic pirate who ever lived, because his story includes almost every trope of the genre: a royal commission, a doomed voyage, a murder on the quarterdeck, a great prize, a mutiny, a buried treasure, a betrayal by a patron, a rigged trial, a rope that broke, a body in chains at the mouth of a river. It is astonishing how much of Golden Age piracy fiction lives inside the life of one Scottish captain. The ship and the man in parallel. Both were launched with royal blessing. Both carried the king's papers. Both were sent out to serve empire. One to hunt pirates, the other to command the hunter. Both were consumed from the inside. The Adventure Galley by the shipworm. William Kidd by the political machinery of men more powerful than he was. Both were stripped. The galley of her guns and rigging and stores at Sainte Marie. Kidd of his commission, his marriage, his New York merchant's house, his name. Both were burned or hanged for the public good. The ship to sink and be forgotten. The man to hang and be seen. Both were left as warnings. And in the strange arithmetic of the sea, neither has ever quite come home. The true wreck of the Adventure Galley lies somewhere beneath the sand of Sainte Marie Harbour, unfound after 3 centuries and 2 disputed searches. The true William Kidd lies beneath the folklore, the man his backers used, sacrificed, and then permitted history to mythologize into something both worse and more heroic than he ever was. The Whig lords who funded the expedition, Somers, Shrewsbury, Bellamont, kept their offices, their estates, their political careers. Their names appear in history books as statesmen. Kidd's name appears in ballads and children's stories. The ship they built for him is a footnote in maritime archaeology. There is a lesson in that ratio somewhere, if you want to look for one. Whether the Adventure Galley was cursed, in the end, depends on what you mean by curse. If you mean an unlucky ship, no more so than 100 others of her era. If you mean a ship used up by empire and then abandoned when convenient, that is simply what empire has always done to its instruments. Kidd got the gibbet, the galley got the fire. Their backers got the peerage. There are ships that sink, and there are ships that are never permitted to be finished. The Adventure Galley lies. If she lies anywhere, beneath the warm shallows of Ile Sainte-Marie, wormed down to almost nothing, her keel bones scattered under 3 centuries of coral and silt, her 46 sweeps long gone, her 34 guns long fished up or long rusted through, her name still on a customs docket in a London archive, still on a bill of lading at Deptford Yard, still on the lips of every diver who has ever tried and failed to find her. Her captain lies, if he lies anywhere, in an unmarked place. The gibbet chains at Tilbury rusted through long ago. The tarred body returned, in time, to the estuary mud, somewhere between the King's Commission and the King's Rope, between the launch on the Thames and the fire at Sainte-Marie. William Kidd stopped being a man and became a story. And on nights when the Malagasy wind lifts and the tide runs slack over the old anchorage at Sainte-Marie, and the coral shadows the shape of something long and keel-like on the seabed, sailors say, though sailors always say, that you can still hear pumps working somewhere under the water, a ship that will not float, a captain who cannot come home. Somewhere in the dark, warm sea off Madagascar, the Adventure Galley is still making her cruise, still hunting, still worming her way through the tide, still on commission, still on the King's business, still and always cursed.